This begins session number 3 of Vantage Point. And for this picture, we have chosen the high vantage point. We're looking down on a little horizontal subject. We've chosen to do it with a vanishing point that is about 1/4 of the way down and the horizon line that extends horizontally across the picture. The buildings are large in the foreground. They become a little smaller in the middle ground and quite small in the distance. We have already begun the first wash of yellow ochre and cadmium yellow medium and raw sienna and burnt sienna. Those are the warm undercolors. Now the second wash we put in is a light Prussian blue and viridian green. And then we've horizontally added French ultramarine blue. At this point, we're ready to do the houses that are in the foreground. And the building is in itself beautiful reddish burnt sienna, and we'll add a little bit of yellow ochre, and another color which I love to use is alizarin crimson. Now this is more of a blue red, and it will take the color just a little differently in a little different direction. So these are going to be strokes here at this point, going vertically, and they're going to build this little house. We have already sketched it in very carefully, so we know pretty much where it's going to be, and the lay of the land gives it a bit of a diagonal. So there is a flow this way. And we want to add a little bit more of that color, probably on this side over here, except that this is a side that will receive more sunlight. So we want to be careful to define it with a pale yellow. And I'll start on that edge and then lighten it as I go with clear water. So now we have the foundational colors. The roof of this little house is a kind of a burnt umber, and it has some design, and it's very old. It's like a little thatched roof. So I want to do that with strokes on the diagonal, because that would flow with the design of the house, leaving a bit of patched areas here and there. Now I want to take just a bit of Payne's gray and identify the eave and identify the windows, remembering that windows that are facing sunlight are dark and windows that are in shade are light. That's kind of a rule of thumb, and it works. So I'm showing the windows in this little house. And again, I'm not in dark value yet. I'm going to be very careful how I render this one step at a time. Now going back into Prussian and cadmium yellow, I'm going to add the trees behind the house. And these are, of course, lost and found edge. And they add wonderful value and strength, and also reinforce the design of the house. So here we are. One of the wonderful tools to use in drawings like this will be watercolor pencils, where you could add all of the colors you want, and then just a little bit of water, and it becomes paint. Kind of a neat tool. So here we have those greens stronger, and now I can see that it's important to go back behind the houses across this little inlet and add the lost and found edge and strengthen this behind. And so you'll see those houses jump out. And they're also going to be with reddish roofs, and so I could put those in now. and add that over here as well. All right. Now the foreground needs a little bit of strength, and I'm going to come back down into this with the same warm colors that were used in the first value. They're just going to be strengthened this time. And there are 3 washes that work for a watercolor. There is the warm underpainting, which includes warm colors and cool colors. This is called the first wash, and it's also called light value. Then we find the second value will be actually the same colors, only with much less water. And all you have to do is just carefully find the puddle that you use in your thinking area, go right back to that puddle and go over the first washes again and do it with a little bit more strength. Now the third value is exactly the same. Same colors, much less water. And then you can add some of your accents. And I love to use a purple, which I usually make with French ultramarine and alizarin, which is one of my favorites. And we'll do that in the next session when we pick up the third value. Now, in the second value, we want to still concentrate on the design of the inlet. And I noticed that it's time to add a few more horizontal strokes that would be in this foreground area. I'm just going to add it right as we move along here. Again, this is French ultramarine, and it brings the ripples, the strokes across the foreground and helps the whole picture to be highly reflected. Another color that I love to use in this arena would be cerulean blue. It's a pale, a very beautiful mottled blue that rides on the surface. It has a lot of clay in it, and that's the difference between a transparent and an opaque color. The transparent colors, some of them actually are just dyes. And you want to be careful about the brand that you purchase, because some of it is just like food coloring, and it's very, very harsh and toxic even. But if you choose a color like French ultramarine and in a better brand, you will have great success in being able to lift the color should you need to, because French ultramarine does not stain the paper. The colors that stain the paper are Prussian and phthalo, and you just absolutely will not be able to get those stains out. Once they're in, they're in. Cerulean is another color that lifts off very easily because it has a lot of clay in it. Again, we're talking about colors that maybe are cheaper colors, and the yellow ochre and cerulean and even a magnesium, which I don't hardly ever use, they have a tremendous amount of clay in them. And so they just are, they kind of look thick and almost chalky. So it's good to invest in a good quality paint. I really recommend Winsor Newton for the best. Sometimes Grumbacher's are all right, but the cheaper brands of Grumbacher, like Into the Academy colors, I would not want to use. They are student grade, but they do have a lot of clay in them. And it's important for me to bring this up because some of you are going to want to invest in some good quality materials, and it's helpful to know. Now, cobalt is another blue, like cerulean. It has a lot of clay in it. It rides on the surface, but you can see it has almost the same coloration as French ultramarine. I'm using these different blues to show you how they vary in appearance. And I'm just adding these horizontal strokes with cerulean blue. Now, once I cross over this yellow ochre, it'll be impossible to get rid of it. That's that's a done deal. You're committed, and it won't change. With watercolor, happy accidents are wonderful, and they happen in the first washes generally when you throw in the water and you just let the oozles happen and beautiful things modulate and you create wonderful things. But when you get into these more precision areas with less water, you want to be very careful what you add and how you add it. Now I'm just going to take a bit of cobalt and go over the cerulean just to add a little bit more texture, make it a little bit more interesting. Oh, and I haven't really done the hills on this side. Sorry about that. Let's see what we've got here. We've got some warm color on the top of this hill, and it's going to pick up sunlight. Also, I had just a tad of perhaps Prussian blue in that yellow, so it didn't come in pure and clean. Kind of have to watch that. It's easy to stroke sometimes and not realize what you've left on the brush, so I might want to lighten that a little bit. There are many ways of correcting mistakes, both before and after you do a painting. And we'll spend a whole session with how to draw with chalk and ink and all kinds of materials that create wonderful patterns. And I just love to draw with ink and have the design done beforehand and then do colorations after. But for right now, we're going to stay with clean washes, and we're not going to use any of the tricky fun things. When a painting is dry and you have some problems and you want to get rid of something, there are ways of doing that. And again, we'll take a session and show you how to correct mistakes, such as just using a penknife to scrape paint off, or even just sandpaper and even bleach. It's amazing how many times I've bleached out certain areas of watercolors to go back to the regular paper. But now, only on really good paper can you do these things. The cheaper brand papers will not handle a lot of distress. So I recommend d'Arches 100% rag watercolor paper for any and all work that you want to do. Perhaps Strathmore will handle some of the many things that you could do to distress a paper. But if you're going to go into that kind of activity, you need to use really good paper. This ends this session, and we will proceed next time as we come to third value.